Did you know to do 3D effects like this, you don't need programs like After Effects or Blender? This is all done natively inside of DaVinci Resolve. Let me show you how to do it. So the first thing that you need to get done is you need to get a clean plate of the shot. So you need a shot with a clean plate of the background without the house in it. The way that you do this is you just export a still and then you take it into Photoshop or Pixlr or any generative AI filler and you just remove the house that way. In my last video, the building grow effect, I showed you how to do that. So if you don't know how, just quick go watch that video. Once you have that, you want to drag that into your timeline and head into Fusion. Our first step is to create the 3D model of the house, and it's actually quite simple. Let me show you how. So let's take in our actual footage. So this is our actual clip of the house. You can see it moving forward. Let's go to the first frame and let's add a time speed node. Let's freeze this frame, and now we have a frozen frame of this first frame of the video clip. Now we need to mask each section of the house, and we want to mask based off of the depth of the Z-axis. So Z-axis is sort of going into the footage, if that makes sense. So with this house, for example, this side of the garage sticks out, and then it's this one, and then this window here, and then this part of the house, and then this is sort of the back side of the house. So those are the sections that I'm gonna split my house into. We're gonna start masking our house by using the S polygon node. To do that, just add it anywhere into blank space. You don't want to attach it to anything right now. Make sure that you have your time speed open on your viewer. You can do that by pressing 2 or by dragging it into the viewer. With the S polygon node selected, let's make a mask of this front section of the house. Once you have that mask drawn, you're going to add an S render node. This turns the S polygon into a white and black image, which can then be used as a mask. With the time speed node selected, let's add a merge node. Let's plug the S render into the green foreground element of the merge node. Let's change the merge operator mode to mask. Now if we view our merge node, we have the garage masked out. In empty space, add an extrude 3D node. Plug your S polygon into the extrude 3D. Add a merge 3D node. Now, if we view our merge 3D, you can see our little plane here. This is the S polygon, and if we take the extrude, we can change the extrusion depth and control the thickness of this piece of the house. But currently it's just white, and we want to wrap that garage right over top of it. So let's take the merge and plug it into the foreground element of the extrude 3D. This is what your result is going to look like. It's not going to look very great. It's just going to show two separate sides of the extrude 3D. That's because currently the mask is not taking up the entire plane of the extrude 3D. If we add a transform node after the merge, we can increase the size of the garage, and eventually that's going to fill the entire frame. Oh, I went a little high there, obviously. Let's go up to somewhere there. And now you can see we sort of have a 3D element. But there's an issue. Currently our garage is not actually proportionate at all to the actual video of the garage. And the issue is the extrude 3D, the material that it takes the entire plane from left to right of our 4K footage. So what I mean, if we open our transform node and reset it, the extrude 3D is trying to wrap this entire frame onto the object. And if we just increase the size, as you can see, we're gonna start clipping off the sides. So what we need to do instead is to use an X and Y value for the size. I'm gonna change my pivot point to make this a little bit easier. What you wanna do is to put it on the bottom left corner of your section. So I'm gonna line it up with the left side of the house. Then I'm gonna go to the bottom of the house or bottom of the garage and just bring the Y depth value down until I see it, line it up with a checkerboard, and that's perfect right there, perfect. And now what we can do is we can take our center and drop it down to the bottom right corner. So again, like I said, we want it to just touch the edge of the frame so that it's using the entire frame as a wrap. So as you can see, the corner's touching the side there. Now we need to make sure the bottom touches. Let's go like so. Beautiful. Now the beauty of putting the pivot down here, it's gonna grow and fill the entire frame. So let's increase the X size until it touches the right side, just like so. Let's increase the Y size. Beautiful. Now if we view the merge 3D, you can see our actual 3D element and it's proper to size. BroVFX is a creative company that has put together a huge assortment of professional assets and VFX. Stuff like titles, transitions, effects, overlays, sound effects, whatever you name it, they have it. When they reached out and showed me some of their stuff, I instantly fell in love. Their stuff is super easy and intuitive to use. It just drag, drop, and boom, you have a cinematic masterpiece. And if you take a look at their website, you can find a huge assortment of VFX packs. You can find transitions, you can find effects, you can find sound effects, you can find whatever you might need. But I specifically want to highlight the Bro Pack. It takes all their best performing packs and merges it into one. And best of all, it's pretty budget friendly. But to make it even more budget friendly, I have a discount code that I can give you guys to give you 30% off. If you type in Van Beek promo at checkout, you'll get a 30% discount on your next purchase. But don't wait too long. This code is only valid until the end of February. So make sure that you go get your pack before the end of February. All right, back to the video. Let's add a renderer 3D node so that we can view our 3D footage onto our 2D timeline. We're gonna merge that back over top. And if we look at our media out, now you can see our garage element of the house. We can now add a transform 3D, and we can rotate this, do whatever we want, and we have a 3D element inside of our scene. And one thing I forgot to say, you might notice that there's a little bit of transparency right now inside of our box. And that's because it's not wrapping perfectly, because our polygon mask and our reframing it does not always work perfectly. And to fix that, we're just gonna take this frame and merge it over a black background so that at least then the edges are just black and not transparent. So the way that we're gonna do that is we're gonna add a background node. We're gonna merge this over top of the background. And then this merge here now is actually gonna go into the transform. So if we view that, now we don't have this transparency around the house. It's actually black. And what I actually like to do is I like to add a blur between this S render, because now we can sort of fade this line right here a little bit. So if I blur that, let's say something like so. Now if we look at our extrude 3D, our entire thing is not transparent. It's got a bit of a darker tint, and that gives it a bit of a 3D model look that I actually quite like a lot. So if we look at this here, let's just increase the scale for a second. There we go, that's our 3D piece that we've just created. We can rotate it any which way we want. Now I'm gonna mask and extrude each part of the house. To save some time, I'm just gonna select all of these. I'm gonna hit Control C and then Control V to paste it. And then the only things that I'm gonna change are the polygon itself. I'm gonna line it up with the new section, as well as I'll have to do a little bit of tweaking with the transform node. To keep everything organized, I'm gonna take this old section right here. I'm gonna hit Control G to put it inside of a group. I'm gonna rename that group to Right Garage. Now let me finish up the rest of the house and I'll show you how to put it all together. Okay, so I just finished drawing and masking each section of the house. I grouped them to keep it all tidy. And if I plug these all into the Merge 3D here, you'll sort of see the house slowly come together. Let's plug that in there. Let's plug that in there. And it looks pretty good, but this is just the shape of the house. This is pretty much exactly what you would get if you just did one mask. And it looks still fun. You could still do the same effect, but I want there to be a difference in the depth of each of these parts. So that's what we're gonna do right now. So the right garage is probably fine. What we're gonna have to do with each section though, is we're gonna have to add a transform 3D. So let's add that there. And I'm just gonna copy and paste that into each section here, just so that we have control over each section. And now let's set the desired extrusion depth for each of the house pieces. So let's start with the right garage. Let's open that up here. Let's go into the extrude. And as far as the actual depth, it needs to go back as far as the actual house will go. So if our house, let's say our overall width, we want sitting around there, that's how deep we'll want it to go. It's actually gonna come out of the front here. So I might type in a 0.4 or so. That might be a little bit much. Let's tone it down a little bit. So there we go. Now we want this part of the garage to show up just a little short of that. So let's go into our other section of the garage and let's change the extrusion depth. Okay, so it's getting closer, but the roof doesn't actually stick out that far. So let's go 0.4 as well. And then let's tone it down a bit. Something like this, and now you can see we're getting this staggered look of the actual house in real life. Now let's go with the blue part of the house, change the extrusion depth. Let's go type in 0.3 or so, and that sits a little further back as well. Now let's go into the white section of the house, extrusion depth, and that can go maybe around there. And now you can see we're sort of getting this effect of the house. The only thing is the backside is completely flat, and when we spin that around, that's not gonna look very good. Obviously, the backside is not realistic at all anyways, because it is just a mirror of the front of the house. If you wanted to, you could add an image plane in 3D, take a picture of the back of the house and then paste it on to make it a bit more realistic. But for this scenario, what we're actually gonna do is we're gonna use the transform 3Ds to just skew with this a little bit. But let's not forget about this little back section. Let's also extrude that guy over here. So that one we want coming a little back, maybe something like so. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna just make the back stick out a little bit more on the lower side. So again, just with the garage, let's take the transform and let's push it a little further back in the Z axis. Something like so, not too much, just so that there's a bit of depth change on the back of the house, maybe a little bit more, something like this. And if you're taking too much off the front, you can just go in and extrude it a little bit more like so. It's just tweaking to what you think is gonna look natural. Let's take the other side of the garage and let's take the transform and let's push it back in the Z axis as well a little bit, something like so. Now it's not sticking out enough in the front, so let's extrude that a little bit more as well. Something like that. And you don't have to do it to each section. You're just trying to get it so that the back of the house is not completely flat. And something like that for the sake of the tutorial is gonna look fine. So again, this merge 3D is going into the renderer 3D, which is being merged back on top of our footage. So if we take a look at our footage, you can see that the house is not proportionate at all, but that's quite okay. We're gonna fix it quite simply here. We're gonna take our original footage so that we have reference, and we're gonna plug it in over top of our house. That's gonna show the entire house. We're gonna make sure that we're sitting on frame 0 because that's the freeze frame that we have. And we're just gonna take the blend and tone it way down. Just so that we can see it and use it as a guide. Now we're gonna take this merge 3D, go into transform and change the scale settings and bring the house to full size. And as soon as you size the house up, let's make sure that, let's say we're sizing up the top so that it lines up, which is about right there. Let's make sure the peak of the house lines up perfect. You'll notice that the rest of the house now doesn't line up, and you're gonna run into this issue where you're turning the size down and up and it's just not gonna work out. And that's why I threw these transforms in after each of these sections, and that's how we're gonna fix this. Again, you might need to do a little bit of playing with everything, but now with the transform of the right garage, I'm just gonna turn the scale down, and I'm gonna turn it down until it matches the size of the actual footage. Now I'm gonna take the other side of the garage, I'm gonna turn the scale down until it matches the actual size of the footage, which is right there. Then I'm gonna take the blue section, turn the scale down, just like so. And the roof is already lined up, so that's fine. I just gotta take this back section, and this one I actually have to turn up. That's just because we are making a 3D model based off of our guesses of the depth of the Z-axis. So now if we go back into our merge 3D, you can see that we still have the exact same effect with the house. The actual scale of this plane, the actual size of this plane is just turned down a little bit, which in return is making the actual house size. Now, something that you might run into is you might run into something like this because we turn the scale down more on the front part of the garage than we did the back part of the garage. And now we have this ugly line showing up right there. So I'm just gonna slightly skew the footage just to make that work. So I'm gonna take this front part, which is right here. I'm gonna open the S polygon. We're gonna actually just put that right there into the left viewer like so. And then we're gonna take the merge 3D into the right viewer so we can see it there. Let's zoom back in. And how I'm gonna easily fix this is I'm gonna grab the bottom points right here, and I'm just gonna tap down on my keyboard just until that lines up there, and then just make sure that if it's animated like it is right now, I'm just deleting that first keyframe. There we go, now it's lined up perfectly. All right, you guys are doing great. I mean, at first glance, this literally just looks like the freeze frame of the house, but if we take our merge 3D and we add a transform 3D right after it, you can see that this house is actually the 3D model of the house that we just created. And one thing I'm just noticing, because our image planes are lining up exactly right here with the backside of this guy and the backside of this guy, is let's just offset that ever so slightly. So let's go into, that was the blue and the white section. So let's go into the blue section and just punch in the Z axis just a hair. And now if we look back at our footage and rotate it, we're not gonna have that same issue. Beautiful. Now, this is a really important step, is you need to change the pivot point of the transform 3D. And you need to make sure that it is in the center of the house, otherwise the rotation and the animation is gonna look really bad. So let's make sure that in the X-axis, which is side to side here, that we have the pivot set right in the middle of the house. And again, you're sort of just doing this based off of guesswork, so something like that. Now let's make sure that the Z-axis or the Z-axis is put into the center of the house like so, and also the Y-axis. And now when we use the transform 3D, the center rotational point is actually in the right spot. And now comes the fun animating part. Let's just for a second turn down the scale, and we're gonna draw a mask around the fence that our clean plate generated, just because I'm gonna use that to actually make the house appear. So I'm gonna go like this, like so, bada bing, bada boom, and then I'm going to invert that. So now when I drag the Y of the house down, it's gonna actually go behind the fence. And it looks like I didn't actually draw this mask big enough. Let's tone this down here or turn it down. So I'm gonna give you some rough parameters for the actual 3D animation, but this is gonna be a lot of trial and error. Animating in 3D is actually a lot harder than animating in 2D. I've been animating in 2D for quite a while now, and it's just second nature at this point. But to get the keyframing right for a 3D animation was actually a bit of a struggle. So I'm gonna go based off of what I know. So we're gonna set the Y value just so that it hides behind the fence, or in your case, it's gonna hide behind the ground or whatever you're keyframing it behind. I'm gonna go to, not right at the start of the video, let's say frame 10. I'm gonna keyframe the Y value, and then I'm gonna go forward 20 frames to frame 30 and bring the Y value up. I'm gonna start with the house at a smaller scale. You don't have to do this, this is just my preference. Then at frame 30, let's add a keyframe on the Y rotation, and let's go forward 20 frames again, frame 50, and spin the Y all the way around to 360. So that's doing a full spin. Then let's add a keyframe on scale at frame 50. Let's go forward to roughly 15 frames to frame 65 and set the scale back to 1. So the animation is really rough, but what we have now is the house coming up. We have the house spinning 360, and then we have the house coming back into its original position. But unfortunately right here, you can see that the house is clipping behind the original mask. So after it appears above the fence, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add a keyframe to my polygon mask. I'm gonna go forward 1 frame, and I'm gonna take the entire mask and just drag it off the screen. And now when the house scales up, it's just gonna go in front of the fence like so. Okay, so now we need to ease a lot of the keyframing so that it sort of bounces up into place, does a real fast spin, and then drops into place. So the way that we're gonna do that is right here at the starting frame. So it goes up towards this top Y axis here. So let's open the spline editor and select our transform 3D. Let's work with just the Y offset right now. We're gonna hit zoom to fit. We're gonna grab both of them, hit S. It's sort of like the building grow effect. I'm gonna drag this over and then just cushion in this a little bit. And now it's sort of gonna click into place real fast. And we just wanna offset the actual rotation with the movement of the house a little bit. So to do that, I'm just gonna go into keyframes, show only selected tools. And now let's hit zoom to fit. And so the Y offset, let's just drag it a little bit after the Y rotation starts. So now it's offset, it's less uniform, and it looks a little bit more natural. As well, let's go to here and let's add some rotation as well. So I'm gonna just mess around with it. I'm gonna bring the Y value maybe to here and the Z value to there for rotation. I'm gonna keyframe that. I'm gonna go back to frame 10 and I'm gonna put that back at 0. Now I'm gonna ease those two that I just did. Grab both of them, hit S, beautiful. Now let's work with the Y rotation, which is gonna start at frame 30. And we want that to look like a start slow and end slow and real fast in the middle, so that it sort of does a whoop, like a little quack, a little fast, little spin. Holy moly. And what we're gonna do here is we're gonna hit Shift T, and that's gonna open these ease controls. It's just a little bit easier sometimes than dragging the handles. and we're just gonna increase this ease. And I think my rotation, I think it's my Z rotation that I did was a little bit crazy. So let's just tone that down a little bit, something more like so. All right, so we have the house coming up, doing its spin, and then it's gonna drop down into place. But we want a little bit more movement out of the rotation. So let's go frame 30, let's go to frame 50. Now let's set another keyframe for the rotation. Let's put it sort of around 0 so it's looking straight on. Change the Z value around there. And now when it comes into place, I sort of want it to lean back and then drop into place. So at frame 50, we already have a keyframe on these 3. We also need to add a keyframe on the Y value because that is offset right now. So now let's go forward to the end, and we want it, it's sort of in the middle here. We want the X rotation to sort of go up because I want this to drop into place, sort of like so. And then here, I want the Y value now to be at 0. So the house is set down. We want the Z value to also be at 0 so that there's no rotation on the house. And we want the X value to be at 0. But I sort of want this to overshoot and sort of lean forward a little bit. So I'm gonna go forward maybe 6 frames or 5 frames or so, and I'm gonna add another keyframe on the X rotation. If we go into the spline editor and work on just the X rotation, we're gonna have to do some easing here. I'm just gonna first select everything and hit S, and that's already gonna do a pretty good job. And now if you look at that, it's gonna rotate and it's coming in, it's leaning back a little bit, and then it's overshooting. You can see this little jump right here, and it's then sitting back into place. It's not quite as extreme as I want it to, so let's drag this over. Let's make this jump a little bit more extreme. So now it's sort of clicking into place, if you will. Now we need to do a little bit more easing with our scale. To open that up, we want it to start slow and end fast. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start slow like so, and it's gonna click into place like so. And then same thing, we wanna do that same thing with our Y offset because we just added some keyframes to the end. I'm just gonna hit F on these guys, drag that back like so. This one doesn't matter as much, something like that. All right, and let's just take a look at the 3D animation we just created. Beautiful. All right, so we have our animation done, but we do want to add some motion blur to that. So after the renderer 3D node, let's add a vector motion blur. And now you need to go into the renderer 3D and you need to click output channels and click vector. That's gonna give the movement information to the vector motion blur. And now let's just adjust the scale to our liking. So I'm gonna do something like that. And this is real world physics motion blur. But for now, while we're finishing that up, I'm just gonna turn that off because it is quite computer intensive. Now we want to merge our real footage back over top of this clip. So let's take our real footage, let's drag it over top, and let's find where our house actually locks into place. I'm just gonna turn the merge off for now so that we can see it. And you can use your transform 3D keyframes because frame 65 is when it actually locks into place. But in my case, I have it sort of bobble forward here. So I'm probably gonna use roughly right here to blend in. So let's add a time speed node to our real footage, and let's put the delay at frame 68. So the clip is gonna start playing at 68. I'm gonna turn the blend all the way down to 0. I'm gonna see 1, 2, 3. So that's once the actual house is perfectly in place. And then I'm gonna turn the blend back up. So it's gonna have actually a slight crossfade to the clip, but I don't think it's gonna be very noticeable. And now just a couple more effects are really gonna sell this transition here. So we're gonna add camera shake to our footage. We're gonna add the one that doesn't have the gray box. That's the fusion one, that one right up there. I'm gonna add some camera shake. We're gonna go to our transform keyframes, and again, frame 65 is where it first hits the ground. We're gonna grab our camera shake and we're gonna set a keyframe on overall strength. We're gonna go back 5 frames and turn the strength down to 0. And then we're gonna go forward 15 frames to frame 80 and turn this overall strength down to 0 again. Now in the spline editor, we're gonna turn this into a shark tooth, I like to call it. So we're gonna grab all of the points, we're gonna hit S to smooth them out. We're gonna grab this first handle and we're gonna ease it in as much as we can. So it's sort of starting to rumble and then impact right there. We're gonna turn this down a little bit, something like that. And then the rumble is gonna continue for a while and then slowly dissipate at the end. To control all these parameters at once, I'm gonna link the rotation deviation by using an expression. So right click, hit expression, drag that to Y deviation, right click, hit expression, drag this plus to X deviation. And now X deviation controls all three of them. And I'm gonna put my value around 0.6 maybe, 0.06, sorry. And now when we have our impact, there's a bit of camera shake, but you can see our canvas edges are coming into the frame. So let's change the mode to duplicate. And then let's also make sure that we add some motion blur to this camera shake. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some handheld movement to the shot. And you can do that with another camera shake and just turning the speed down. So camera shake, we're gonna use the open effects method one now. So that's that one right there. We're gonna turn the speed all the way down and then just turn it back up a little bit. We're gonna not zoom to crop and we're gonna change the edges to replicate. Now if we play that back, our footage has some camera shake and then bang, it impacts on the ground and the transition is hidden seamlessly. But another more realistic way of adding camera shake is using the BroVFX effect. And we're gonna search for Handycam or handheld shooting. And if we drop that in, this is just some real nice parameters to give some realistic handheld movement. And I can still adjust it here. So I'm gonna turn the zoom level down a little bit, as well as the wiggle wobble, if you wanna call it that. And this is just gonna give a more realistic handheld look than my own camera shake. Now from the BroVFX Film Mix pack, I'm gonna add the cinematic RGB flare, and that just gives it this real 3D render look, and I just love it. It gives a really nice effect. What we're gonna do is I am gonna turn the RGB effect off just so that there's no aberration in the footage. I'm also gonna turn the smooth strength down a little bit. That's just changing that outside. It's giving a bit of an anamorphic look to the shot, but I love the natural flare that is added with the footage. And then I'm gonna go one step further and I'm gonna add some movement to the grass here. But if you want to learn how to do that, you're gonna have to subscribe and wait for a future tutorial. All right, guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it and that you learned something. I trust that you did. If you guys are looking for more DaVinci Resolve content, I have a bunch more tutorials coming out and I've already posted a bunch as well, so go check them out right now. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, maybe turn the bells on, leave a comment of what you wanna see next. All right, guys, till next time.